Good afternoon, everyone. It's Dr. Gershon with another Endeavor Better Health webinar. I am thrilled to be here today with an incredible company that truly is revolutionizing cancer screening using remote robotic diagnostics integrated into telemedicine and your iPhone. I first, as always, want to thank our incredible audience for being so supportive of 2023 and our webinar series, which was launched in January. We have now 1.45 million views, and we're really proud of our audience who has been incredibly interactive with questions, with thoughtful emails, with follow-up. And I urge you to please let us know where you're logging in from, and please put your email in. If you have any questions that we can't get to in this webinar, we'll be more than happy to send you a response through your email. And you can also feel free to subscribe to our newsletter simply by addressing subscribe at gershoncapital.com. Here today, I think we're going to once again highlight the overriding theme, which we believe at Endeavor from our research represents the changes and the pivot in the macroeconomics, which dictate a new type of CEO, a leader who knows that it's important for his company or her company to be able to bring that innovation and technology to large enterprise partners. This process means collaboration, partnership. It means understanding the importance of driving effective teams on project level relationship building with large Fortune 500 companies. These projects will allow validation of the technology in a commercial environment. And that validation will allow sustainable growth of emerging companies. Today, I am thrilled to have Torrey Smith and Chris Green representing ENDIATX. This is a company that is really revolutionizing cancer screening. Its remote robotic diagnostics are very novel in their vision, in their approach to patient care, driving patient outcomes. With that, I really want to introduce first Torrey Smith and then Chris Green, who really, I think, will tell you about their journey, how they came together, the integration of Torrey's background with an incredible engineering, scientific platform and foundation, and then integrating that into an entrepreneurial business platform. So with that background, I would love to introduce Torrey and Chris. Welcome to Endeavor Better Health. We'd love to hear about you personally in brief, and then a bit about the journey that has led you to where you are, and then finally the future of where you see the company going.
Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction. And, we'd like to get off just by starting to say thank you to Endeavor for hosting this, and to BetterHealth. We see an opportunity in this community right now across all of the stakeholders to basically work together to try to raise the standard of care for patients around the world. So my personal background originally started in the world of aerospace engineering. I just love the concept of cutting edge technology. And if we can combine that with healthcare, I see a beautiful opportunity to try to advance the state of the art. And so I think our personal mission here at ENDIATX has become one of micro robotics in the human body and where we can go with that. And with that, I'm just honored to be a part of this awesome team. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah. So thank you again to Endeavor and BetterHealth. We're thrilled for this collaboration and publicity because we do sincerely care about delivering this technology to the world. I personally come from a somewhat different background. I was an educator. I was an entrepreneur. I was an investor and successful, but there comes a point where the money itself is not its own satisfaction at the level that belonging to a calling and an enterprise are. And having known Torrey and seen this company begin and having invested in it myself, there came a moment where, because I've lost relatives to cancer too young, I sincerely wanted to involve myself full time. And it's been a real journey the past couple of years, integrating into this full time. And I feel lucky to be at the point where we can really bring this to the world.
Yeah, thank you for that personal backdrop and overview. Those personal stories really go to the issue of the complexity and the fun and the beauty of being an entrepreneur, putting people with different backgrounds together, skill sets that combine to be an effective team. So I would love to kind of continue and amplify on that.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the neat things when you're launching a company in Silicon Valley is, you sit down with your buddies and you're working on a project and you say, okay, how are we going to attract the smartest, most passionate engineers in the world to this project? Because right here in Silicon Valley, engineers it's almost like a playground, right? You could take your pick of where you might want to work, and there are huge salaries available to many of the skill sets that we need. And what we found at ENDIATX is by prototyping the robots ourselves, by swallowing the robots ourselves, by putting in the best design work that we could, and then putting it on display, we were able to start getting the attention of the deep tech community. And several years ago, if we looked at our tech stack, we would have seen many gaping holes in our ability to bring this all the way to market. But today, where we stand now, from embedded firmware to the basic software at the bottom of our stack, all the way up to the graphical user interface and how we get into the cloud, to the mechanical design, to the electrical engineering. And then, Chris on the business side, taking this to the world. We actually have the majority of the stack fully represented. And so at this point, we're just hoping to bring more people in so that we can do this more quickly and actually make this tech real.
Yeah, fantastic. It's really, I can almost envision the weekly meetings of brainstorming. And I see in your background, actually, you're sitting, in your corporate headquarters where the action actually happens. So
it's an exciting time for us. Basically, we're about 9,000 square feet. We build these robots right here where we design them. We actually just got an Arborg injection molding machine. It's the same exact type of machine that Lego first went to mass production with. And, in a world where you might spend $100,000 to get a high quality tool made to shoot parts by some person on the other side of the planet, we decided, let's spend $8,000 on eBay, go acquire this machine. We're going to make these tools ourselves in-house. Vertical integration means you decide that you're not going to pay people outside of the company to get smarter than you. You're going to actually put in the hard work, and your team's going to get smarter that day. And it's been amazing since we've decided to really commit to vertical integration. Our ability to make tiny robots has really accelerated.
Yeah, that's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about the technology, and then I'd like to shift over into partnerships that have helped you grow the company. One thing that is for sure is that, 2000 to 2020 was an era of vision by entrepreneurs. The macroeconomics allowed the cost of money to be either zero or negligible. And that allowed a lot of entrepreneurs to be able to drive vision through high channels of liquidity. The next 10 years, according to our research at Endeavor or more, will be low liquidity, compressed valuations, and therefore the bar for investors in a risk-off environment, which we think is going to last many years, means that partnerships are key in terms of working together to commercialize products. And our benchmark at Endeavor is the number of companies that we can drive into commercially successful distribution channels. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the innovation and then the partnerships.
Why don't I kick off innovation and hand it over to Chris for partnerships? It's funny, in the deep tech community, we rely on the raw power of differentiation to help us stand out and help us bring in the money and talent we need. And it's funny because when you have deep tech differentiation, you sometimes can go against the macro trends. So for example, you note 2000 to 2020 as a time of soaring vision and lots of money being poured into the entrepreneurial community. But what did that bring us in health technology? The funny thing is, the first pill camera, which sort of forms the foundation that we're standing on, was actually swallowed in October of 1997 and FDA cleared in 2001. Now it's 2023 and we're deciding to make these move under their own power. And the weird thing we see is that when money is cheap, it often flows to low-hanging fruit. And so here where money gets a little bit more tight, we are finding incredible traction in the investment community because people are essentially no longer just throwing money at anything that gets their attention. Now you really have to prove why your team matters. And this is where we're actually able to actually stand on very firm ground because, at this time, Chris can tell you that robots that move under their own power, telemedicine enabled everywhere in the world, is actually starting to sound like a pretty cool new proposition.
Yeah. Actually, just this morning, I listened to our friend Tim Draper talk about how there were companies that asked for $10 million of venture and they would give them $100 million and say, oh, we need 10, here's 100. He literally said that. And he said it ruins companies. So perhaps, Dr. Gershon, as you're suggesting now that we're moving back into a more realistic phase of limited liquidity where companies have to prove their validity, that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing for us. And certainly it's crucial to point out that for PillBot, the world is demanding this technology. We don't have to prove to doctors and plead with them to please try this out. They realize that the way they've been doing investigation of the stomach is relatively antiquated in most cases. And there's a strong underlying demand in the whole space for this march of progress.
It's been amazing. I mean, every time we show a gastroenterologist what we're actually building and explain that this platform of micro-robotic telemedicine becomes initially a screening or diagnostic tool, but from there it becomes a treatment tool. And from there it goes to other parts of the body. The average GI that we interact with asks us if we're fundraising. They ask us if we can take angel checks, and then they say, could you come to my clinic and do clinical trials with me first, because I want to be a part of launching this technology. And so what we stress about here at ENDIATX is primarily, how do we actually get these robots to work well enough that we can hand it off to the market? I have a little prototype here today, that the typical viewer of the podcast would basically, I think we could describe what we're building to people as a moving eyeball in the human stomach. Let's give a live video feed to a gastro, right? And honestly, borrow a fair amount of technology from the world of drones. But in our case, shrink it down, make sure that it's biocompatible, and make sure that it can pass proper HIPAA compliance.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about some of the logistics so that the audience really understands the incredible wow factor here. So, many years ago, there was a science fiction movie that somewhat looked at similar things about, reducing the size of people and entering the human body. But you really have something now that you can use telemedicine, you can use iPhone technology, you can swallow this device and then have incredibly precise control over it. And you talk about really kind of the different phases of development here, which is diagnostic and screening, and then, therapeutic. So let's talk a little bit more with a bit more detail about what is it like? You're a patient, you have certain symptoms. What's the course that they can expect? Because a lot of what we do here on the webinar really is about understanding that everyone at some point in their life will be a patient. And the technology, while it is kind of amazing in and of itself across the board through all companies, at the end of the day, this is a practical discussion about patient empowerment and impact on patient care.
So I think for GI diagnosis in particular, so someone who's in acute distress with stomach pain, even in the first world, even assuming they have excellent coverage, they often face a backlog and kind of the worst bureaucracy and handling of the system. So they may first go to their primary care doctor and then be told to visit a specialist and then be put on hold by the specialist. And only when in severe pain after, say, 3, 4, 5 visits and several months, if not a year of waiting, will eventually undergo an EGD, a full upper endoscopy, right, with actual tubes inserted into their stomach while they're sedated in a hospital, which comes at huge cost. And then they're either diagnosed for something relatively basic like gastritis, or they're cleared, or God forbid, they find out that they have a late stage and perhaps terminal condition that could have been intervened if they'd had a screening much earlier when they were first in distress. So by being able to do remote screening at very low cost with no sedation and no hospital visit whatsoever, you skip over the entire struggle of that process. And it comes at enormously reduced cost and carbon footprint and has a sort of democratizing element because it's so easily accessible.
Yeah, I mean, this is $35 of parts I'm holding in my hand. However we choose to package that, I think this is going to be a good deal for people.
No, that's fantastic. So at Endeavor, we are thematic investors, and one of the big themes that you've just touched upon is the shift from hospital to doctor, office to patient home. This patient home-centric focus is being picked up by Google and Apple in particular. Certainly everyone understands the power of an Apple Watch and the integration of some of the healthcare focus in iPhone technology, smartphone technology, and the corollary to whatever devices are attached to those, like an Apple Watch, really, I think, are kind of foreshadowing what we can expect for the next several decades. The ability to now take kind of a diagnostic approach in cooperation with your healthcare provider in your home setting speaks to many, many different issues of empowering the patient to be able to control their own healthcare destiny. So I would like to talk a little bit about the process of training physicians on this, because one of the key things that I think is a truism about the medical profession, it is relatively slow to move forward on new technology. I'd love to be able to shift this conversation into a practical focus of how soon can we expect this to really impact overall standard of care?
So we ran an experiment at Digestive Disease Week 2022 in San Diego, where we would bring gastroenterologists into a room, and there was nothing in the room, just a fish tank with a stomach model. And basically, you throw the robot into the fish tank, and there's an Xbox controller sitting on the table. And we just didn't say anything. We just bring them in, and they would sort of see the Xbox controller and pick it up because we'd sort of encourage them, right? But we're not giving any instructions. And within 15 to 30 seconds, they'd be flying it around in the fish tank like it was a little video game. And the neat thing here is that you're not pushing a tube that's got blunt edges with a relatively high amount of pushing force through the human body. You basically have this little capsule that's just squirting water in 6 different directions to kind of maneuver, almost like an Apollo capsule, right? With those little thrusters. In our case, we just have little lumens inside the robot to create that little squirt of water from the water that you just, drank from a glass, say. And we were surprised to see people just taking intuitive control from the system. Now, as we advance to using an iPhone, say, or maybe even Android and a touchscreen interface, the exciting thing is we can build all kinds of closed loop control algorithms, right? You can imagine that as we gather all this data, we can have data services. We can bring in a little bit of AI to sort of make the experience a little bit more intuitive and kind of try to in general, just lower the barriers to entry, make it easier to operate, make it kind of obvious. If there are some jobs that the pill could do on its own while the doctor is focused on more substantial things, let's let that take over. But the bottom line is, this is a very low barrier to entry. And if I said, how do I train you on using a $75,000 endoscope that could kill a patient if you use it improperly? That's a serious undertaking. On the other hand, what if I say, the subscription to the software we don't need to sell software when the robots themselves are totally fabulous unit economics. The onboarding fee to use a case of PillBots would just be buy some product, install the software on your iPhone, and you're doing, lightweight upper endoscopies right from the beginning. Maybe we'll give you like a bowl of water and you can use one of them for training. But the whole point here is we see 1, possibly 2 orders of magnitude lower barrier to entry with this kind of tech.
Yeah, that's terrific. I think, physician kind of mindset in terms of adopting new technologies really is a process. So the first part of that process is clinical studies, evaluating the clinical studies. How does that compare to current standard of care? And then certainly thought leaders getting involved on, a national level with publications and review articles, and then use of that in major academic centers as part of this process. Give us a sense about where you are in this protocol-driven, uptake.
Well, we just had a fabulous meeting with the FDA a couple of weeks ago. So the FDA pre-submission document was filed a couple months ago. On December 8th, we met with FDA and discussed in length our goals of proceeding through the OUS pilot studies just about 2 months from now, and then through the full-scale trial at Mayo Clinic later in 2024. And they approved of our plan and our predicate pathway. There are some questions still to be determined about reimbursement and coding, but I do believe that in general, the whole space understands that this is the paradigm shift that's coming, and it's a welcome one because it'll streamline the entire process for GI doctors, let them see more patients more quickly, not have to painfully delay people.
I mean, we might even consider ourselves to be in a post-COVID world where, we have access to appropriate precautions, we have vaccines, we have facilities in place to keep our population safe. But even in that paradigm, in the UK, for example, there are more than 400,000 cases of gastroscopy that are overdue, where people are on super long waiting lists just to have a 5-minute look around in their stomach. And we're just thinking, if we can take that out of the hospital and have that look around, in the home or at the care facility, or maybe just in the clinic, just lower the barriers a little bit. I think there's a lot of excitement in the community for this kind of tech.
Fantastic. Let's talk a little bit more granularly about anatomy. So what is it that you can see exactly from ingestion to exit?
Sure. So we focus specifically on the EGD, or esophagogastroduodenoscopy space, right? The upper endoscopy. And so we are in particular being held to account to our ability to do either a full EGD ourselves or do enough of an EGD that it becomes a useful tool that a gastro can use every day. So what it means is you swallow the PillBot, it travels down your esophagus on a one-way trip. During that time, we can collect a burst of imagery. And in that phase of operation, we're sort of like the vanilla version of an endoscope. Endoscope's going to be able to dwell, pull back, get a better view during the esophagus. We can't do that. So we're sort of a little bit underperforming in the esophagus, but we will get you some hopefully useful imagery. When we splash down in the stomach, that's where the party really starts. That's where if you skipped your breakfast that day and you drank, a big glass of water, your stomach is now temporarily artificially full of water. And this is the environment where PillBot can really shine. PillBot can move vertically, it can move horizontally, it can rotate in a horizontal plane. PillBot then becomes almost like the tip of your endoscope, minus the endoscope, minus the hospital, minus the sedation, minus the gatekeeping, minus all that cost. So the stomach is where we really shine. But then interesting thing is we've actually gotten some pretty interesting data from what comes next, which is now you enter the duodenum. And, we're trying to find, can we go locate the bile duct? That's pretty hard to see. It's kind of amazing to see that we can actually be a little bit useful beyond the stomach. But what I would say is that if a doctor is interested in basic things like ulcers or lesions or gastritis, all in the stomach, we think PillBot is probably going to be a useful tool to that population.
That's just great. Now, I want to shift a little bit to the future. I want to take your crystal ball out. And the time course of this over the next couple of years is going to be able to harvest quite a bit of data and enthusiasm as this moves forward to commercial launch. What's the next phase of development for the company and the technology?
Well, speaking as an engineer, we don't become engineers because we see a world and we want to make incremental improvements to it. We become engineers because we want to change the world. We want to take what we've read in books and seen in movies and make that real. And then we want to go beyond that. And so with ENDIATX, we feel like we are participating in a micro-robotic revolution where there are companies around the world actually working on tech like this. Peter Diamandis over at Bold, connected to XPRIZE, placed an amazing investment in Bionaut Labs. They're using magnetic fields and microscopic corkscrews, creating little bots that can swim up, your spine. There's Bertrand Duplot and Robotic over in Paris doing rice grain-sized creepy crawlies that are intended to do brain surgery. And so with ENDIATX, we kind of join in the fray. What we're adding to the equation is let's make these things move under their own power and be able to capture the telemedicine angle to hopefully get our particular tech far away from traditional hospital establishments. Like, let's get this amazing healthcare to every person, right? And so we hope to participate in this revolution, to put our own contribution into it, and see it go beyond our beachhead of the stomach. I think that if we can make it the size of a pill, then in a few years, we could probably make it the size of a grain of rice. Perhaps we're not going to be swimming everywhere. We might need to sprout legs and tails. We might need to snip as we go and cauterize behind us. I imagine little brain surgery robots, just like Robotic, but hey, maybe we could even do telemedicine. Maybe you could have a tumor that a doctor didn't want to operate on because it's so close to a vital organ. But what if instead of splitting you open and doing a big invasive surgery, what if you could have a little swarm of these guys parked at the tumor interface, just slowly harassing it, right? Wouldn't it be amazing if the standard of care could include that and just say, you know what, this one's a little sketchy. Let's get a couple of microbots on this thing. Let's see if we can identify all the blood vessels that are feeding it, draining it. Let's inject it with some radio enhancers and then hit it with a little bit of radiation, but then those radio enhancers go off like fireworks inside the actual target anatomy. I think we just want to give doctors around the world tools that help them do their jobs. And we want to give patients all around the world dignity and agency.
Yes. I would add that there's a beautiful vision where rather than people in acute distress seeking care and seeking extreme interventions like brain surgery, you have nationwide, society-wide prophylactic screening. That is obviously coming in the future of the world. I can't say it's 5 years from now, but it's not 500 years from now. Maybe it's 10 or 20 or 50 years from now, but that is what humanity deserves and eventually will be delivered. So if we could be on the forefront of bringing the best of technology to the world, that's what makes us proud.
We have a whiteboard at work, and right now it's just a virtual concept because the number on the whiteboard is 0. But the goal is to get a big monitor, a big flat screen, and it's going to go 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And the idea is we're going to put a 1 on that at some point, and then hopefully a 2, a 3, a 4. And to make a contribution to that monitor that everyone at the company is going to see, throughout the course of their workday, is we want to have the moment happen where a doc calls us up and said, hey, I was screening a 23-year-old who just enrolled in a healthcare plan, and they got a pillbot screening. And we weren't looking for anything, but we found an early stomach cancer, believe it or not. And at that stage, it's actually quite easy to cure, and we managed to cure it. And I just wanted to let you know,
We saved a life.
that's going to put a 1 up on that monitor, and that's what our team is really gunning for. We don't want to say we put 1 million pillbots in people, and that's 1 million lives saved. Like, we might have to do thousands before we get 1, but that's really what we're on the race for.
Yeah, that's a perfect transition. Perhaps Chris can pick up on the partnership aspect of, you're working with Mayo. Talk a little bit about this focus on, strategic partners, whether in the academic setting or in industry, to be able to move, your whiteboard forward with more numbers on it.
Yes, of course. We know it's not really practical to invent the wheel. So the business model that this company would prefer to work on is actually articulated in our pitch and our deck materials, is to license out the first iteration of our product while we develop a subsequent iteration. So suppose, for example, that Medtronic wanted to purchase the rights to Pillbot 1.0, which would be delivered theoretically a year and a half or 2 years from now for a ongoing royalty fee. They would lock in that revenue stream for us and free us perhaps with some capital to develop the next iteration of Pillbot, which, as we discussed, would be equipped with tools that would perform targeted drug delivery or polypectomy or wound cauterization or chemistry and microbiome sampling from the gut. That would free us to remain a very lean company, say of only 30, 40, 50 employees, still vertically integrated, still probably right here in this facility that we're sitting in. We wouldn't build an army of sales and marketing people and a global company of thousands. That's not really practical. It doesn't match with our skill set. So absolutely crucial partnerships to integrate into the larger existing system, but to have the flexibility and dynamism of a really small team of basically friends. We understand that that's where we fit in best.
Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit about, the stepwise progression into these partnerships. For example, working on projects or working on clinical applications. How does that look? How do you approach companies like Medtronic or other large device and industry leaders?
We found that when we make friends with the world's finest doctors, who are the innovators driving the advancement in this space, when we earn the respect and friendship of leading physicians, we very quickly earn the attention of those in the larger OEM business community, who have been supplying them with the tools they work with, for the last couple of years. And so as we have made partnerships with some of the finest doctors, we've found that we have some very, very cool friendships developing somewhat organically in the background. And all I will say is that, it's been a huge honor for us at events like Digestive Disease Week. For example, this year in 2023 at DDW, we were able to meet with many of the leaders in the community. And the general consensus has been that there's excitement for this kind of tech. Very large organizations often are better at manufacturing and distribution of product than perhaps the core early stages of R&D. And so there's a beautiful handshake that we can do if we're able to do it right. And that's where Chris has really been helping us take this to the world.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, the technology that you are putting out there now, clearly in the next several years, is going to impact, hundreds of thousands of people around the world. I think, as you said, is part of an overall movement within the robotics world that is yet unseen by most doctors and certainly by most patients. But starting out with a vision is what entrepreneurship is all about. And then bring people together like you and Chris to be able to synergistically work with skill sets to build partnerships, build relationships, whether it's with doctors or large medical facilities, large enterprises. This is a collaborative environment for the next decade to solve really big problems. And I am just very appreciative of this opportunity to be able to interview both of you today. I welcome you back. When you have more data and you're moving these projects forward, it'd be very exciting to hear updates. So thank you for spending the time today to talk about this incredible move forward in healthcare. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today and being incredibly supportive of the Endeavor Better Health webinar series.
The feeling's mutual, Dr. Gershon. Thank you for having us, and we'd be happy to come back.
Yeah, thank you so much. And once again, to Endeavor and to Better Health, it's a real honor to have this platform. And we invite anyone to reach out to us if we could potentially help them in their entrepreneurial journey.
Fantastic. Thank you again. Stay tuned. I'm just going to sign off here.